Do you ever watch a show that you haven't seen in years, wanting to relive some nostalgia, then finding something you don't exactly remember? I have when watching old episodes and reading Curious George. Let me show you some examples. This is Curious George, a monkey, but he doesn't have a tail. I swear I remember him having a tail, but okay, Mandela effect at work. But wait, he should have a tail. Not in the way I remember it, but in the monkeys have tails way. And he's a monkey, right? Okay. Let me show you another example. Did you know the man in the yellow hat is insanely rich? Not only does he have a doorman apartment in New York City, not only does he have easy access to planes and boats and a literal jetpack, but he can park his car in New York. But he also only owns the color yellow. Kind of weird, but nothing strange, nothing creepy or groundbreaking for a theorist like myself, right? Okay. Smoking gun here. Why the hell does Curious George go to space? No, seriously, he goes to space on his own multiple times. One of them is he has to fix a satellite in 5 minutes or the entire planet is doomed. Curious George is a monkey. Why is he going to space? After going through this entire show, I have found questions upon questions with a secret plot answering them all. From Russian spies to genetic experiments to this monkey smoking pipe, I solved Curious George. Don't believe me? Let me explain. A common misconception is that Curious George has a tail. Of course, him having one just seems to be a Mandela effect that 99% of the planet just experienced. And for that 1%, I must ask, who hurt you? It's not normal for monkeys to be tailless. That's strange, abnormal, and I want to know why. Why doesn't George have a tail? Sure, the reasonable answer is he's just not a monkey. He's probably just an ape. But if you look at the book, Cecil G. and 9 Monkeys, you will literally find Curious George. This is his first appearance in a book called The 9 Monkeys. He's number 8. He's a monkey. So where's his monkey tail? Well, you know me, I have an entirely normal, reasonable, sane answer. He's a government experiment by the Soviets. Let me explain. Okay, so at first this may seem like an entirely crazy idea, but if you look into it like I did, you'll start to understand. First, Curious George in canon is 31 years old, celebrating his 31-year-old birthday in one of the last printed Curious George books. This isn't like celebrating the birthday of the books, as while it's close, the books would be more like 60 to 80 years at the time of that one. No, this is celebrating his 31-year-old birthday in canon. Okay, but how do we know when this is all set? Like, sure, we can look at it when his first book was released, but that's not concrete proof of when the book is set. Well, if you look into the first Curious George book, you'll find that the man in the yellow hat had a job, something he doesn't have for the rest of the entire series or show. In the first movie, he works for a museum, but that isn't really canon. His job being a specific type of African poacher, something that became illegal in the 50s. This makes it so the man in yellow could only really do his job if he was doing it in the 40s. Sure, it could be earlier, but the general clues point it to be more in the 40s, which would also put Curious George as a book series, as a show, and the age of Curious George himself right in the middle of not only the Soviet Union existing, but in the Cold War. Well, coincidentally, during the Cold War, the Soviet government were experimenting on animals like monkeys, using them to do dangerous tasks that later on people would do for testing purposes. So what if Curious George was one of those experiments? Not buying it? Let me explain. The first problem with my little theory is that just because the timeline matches up doesn't mean the theory in any way is true, right? Well, that's what I thought at first until I began to find more and more evidence. Throughout Curious George, you'll find many episodes where George is surrounded by scientists. There is an unnatural amount of science who should just stumble upon George. From neighbors that just happen to be an astronaut, to George taking 5 steps out of his home and finding people in lab coats everywhere. The best example of this is in the fact that there is not only just one episode, but 2 episodes and an entire movie about him going to space. This is a monkey going to space more than the average astronaut. But why? He's just a random monkey owned by a very irresponsible man in yellow. Why is he going on dangerous trips to space alone multiple times? Well, you know, know me, I have an idea. But first, a word from our sponsor, me! Are you tired of waiting weeks for Noah's videos? Do you find yourself yearning for more content, early access, and more unnecessary features that make you feel superior to the average viewer? Well, do I have the deal for you. Introducing Noah Bolter's Patreon! For the low price of $5, less than the cost of McDonald's burger on the dollar menu, you can unlock all of that and more. Like early access to Noah's amazing, thought-provoking videos. But wait, there's more. Not only do you get to see the videos before the filthy peasants, you also gain exclusive bonus content. That's right, bonus content, deleted footage, weird tangents. These bonus videos aren't just silly bloopers though, they're full extra content. But wait, there's more. I'll throw something to sweeten the deal, your name in the credits. That's right, immortality just for $5. This guy bought a $5 membership and he just can't stop dancing. And this guy also bought a $5 membership and well, he has a lot to say. Take it away, Daniel. So, my name's actually Chris. And well, I bought the $5 membership and let me tell you, it was horrible. Hated it. Couldn't find any benefit. It just really wasn't worth the hype, really. All it gave me was exclusive bonus videos and like something called like early access. You know, complete rubbish. And on top of that, it put my name in the credits. Like, complete garbage if you ask. And that's enough of that. That was horrible. Speaking of horrible, it would be horrible if you didn't become a member to Noah Bolter's Patreon. So go do yourself a favor. Curious George is a weird show. Its general concept is literally a monkey who is semi-adopted by a very wealthy seeming man who has an unhealthy addiction to the color yellow. Every episode is said man letting him do things from stealing to causing destruction to operating spaceships. But why? Why do people let this monkey do these things? From him being in dangerous situations he's not qualified for, just causing destruction. Why is any of it happening? And why does he still not have a tail? Well, after scanning over the episodes that feature George doing something he is not qualified for, like going to space, or when he scuba dives to retrieve a mystery item, there are a few interesting correlations. See, these episodes all come from the simple fact that the man in yellow seems to be friends with many scientists, and they seem to just happen to run into random scientists all the time. Well, that's fun, isn't it? See, in the very first space episode, it opens with a narrator saying,
George liked visiting Professor Wiseman because she did so many different things. This time, she was helping out on a rocket launch.
Now tell me why this single scientist is a rocket engineer, said to be an astronaut, will later be seen as a marine biologist, and throughout more appearances just seems to have a variety of high-level different careers. Like sure, you didn't explain away and say, it's a kid's show, Noah, don't think that hard, but that's just not good enough. No, I wanna know why. Now later in that very episode, we come across another weird situation where George and a man in yellow are in an unnamed space station where a team of 3 scientists explain to them how the man is just gonna go to space and recover a satellite. Now this is already strange, as why is a random civilian with no training going to space on his own, especially in a very important situation like this? You think an astronaut would do that. They even call it out, saying that he is a civilian who should not be going to space in the episode. But, you know, who cares? He's a man in a yellow suit. He's obviously qualified. Except, he doesn't even go to space. See, in the rocket, there are 3 scientists in charge of the major project, a random civilian in a yellow jumpsuit, and a monkey, and they all soon learn that, oops, the only way for the rocket to take off is for 4 buttons to be pressed at the same time. This is a little difficult without 4 hands, so the man in yellow simply can't do it. You'd think they would just have another astronaut, or at this point, literally anyone go along and press the other 2 buttons, but you know, why not just get the monkey to do it? Monkeys have 4 hands, which seems to be the only requirement to operate a rocket and fix a satellite in space. Now, judging by my tone, you can probably tell I do not buy this. No way would the genius Professor Pizza, dear God, what am I doing with my life, make it so only a 4-handed person could operate the rocket that would be fixing a satellite. That would be stupid. And even when we pretend he would do that, you would assume he would get fired. But next time we go to the unnamed space station, he is still there. His single mistake, whether fixed or not, put the lives of dozens in danger, and honestly, it was just stupid. Unless it wasn't a mistake. Okay, here's my theory. The Soviet government is experimenting on George and other animals. something they did do in the Cold War specifically for space travel. They're training him, genetically modifying him, and heightening his intelligence, and they're preparing him for dangerous missions. Every single adventure is a little experiment by these scientists. Professor Pizza didn't just make a rocket only pilotable by a monkey, it was a purposeful design choice to test George and his ability to pick up on something quickly, to adapt to a dangerous, high-tense situation, and most importantly, to listen when asked. Don't believe me? Let me explain. The Soviets themselves did in fact conduct extensive experiments on animals in the Cold War and in the space race. Dogs like Laika were launched into orbit, and countless other animals, including monkeys, were experimented on, were tested, trained, and most sent to die in the cold, airless vacuum of space. Well, that doesn't look very good for George. The space program from this episode is in fact experimenting on animals and literally sending them to space. This isn't even a theory, it's a fact in a weird vocal point in the beginning of the episode. They make it a central plot point to highlight how these animals have been trained to live in space and we living there to study how they adapt. Animals like snakes and dogs and lizards. Now, who else do we know from the show who is an animal that was commonly experimented on in these sorts of space travels that is in the very same episode literally going to space and instantly adapting to the harsh conditions and doing a highly skilled task that would take a team of scientists to do? This stupid monkey. But here's the thing, George isn't just a monkey. No, it's not like he's just stumbling around accidentally doing these high-level tasks. He's actually insanely smart and also very chaotic. He demonstrates complex problem-solving skills, an ability to understand engineering concepts, and let's not forget, he literally understands spoken English, a skill no animal on Earth fully has except us. He performs arithmetic, shows a basic understanding of physics, and has executed some tasks that would stumble some humans. And he can go to space. He also shows an advanced control of his mobility and his ability to adapt quickly, picking up on how to do advanced dances from simply watching in an hour, then winning a competition between people who've known said dance for decades. He then taught this dance to another child without needing to actually verbalize in English once. This all seems like an average, everyday version of training his ability to adapt. He doesn't need to train for space travel if he's training to learn skills themselves in an hour, which is evident he is. There's another episode where he goes to space and once again solves a critical problem that should be well beyond his understanding. And this time, he straight up does a moonwalk. Not only would this likely need him to have deep training, be able to simply walk in zero low gravity, but for the scientists to allow him to do this, they would A, most likely want him to, and B, understand he can. This all feels like overwhelming evidence that George is a very high intelligent animal that can adapt to any situation, understanding complex topics, and problem solving, well, anything, and is also high proof, again, that the Soviets are definitely training him. But hey, maybe you still don't buy it. Well, explain this to me. Why is it that when George goes to space on his first adventure without doing anything space related and it being entirely unplanned, was it that Dr. Pizza, the very same doctor who supposedly accidentally made the rocket only operable by a monkey, had a monkey-sized suit specifically designed without a tail? I would buy that they have smaller suits for animals like apes and monkeys, but those suits would be designed with tails in mind, but he doesn't have one, and he's not built like an ape, so either they had a suit lying around for a small child, or it was for George. And while I'm not a betting man, my money's on the monkey. This all seems completely insane and very strange, but also couldn't possibly be a random coincidence, unless it's on purpose. Okay, you still don't believe me? Maybe you agree on something is going on here, and there is something about George and a space program, but like, it doesn't mean it's the Soviet Union in the Cold War, and it definitely doesn't mean they're training him for special missions. Like, he's going to space twice. Well, it's not just space mission. George's little adventures disguised as, well, adventures extend to the deep sea, for example, where he was sent on a highly classified mission under the supervision of only a handful of the sane scientists who, last time I checked, were not marine biologists scientist or anything in that field in an unnamed country. His objective? Retrieve and dismantle a so-called satellite hidden in the coral reef. Now pause for a second and really think about this. Why is it that George is doing any of this? Why do we only have 3 scientists in these very important missions? And even if they had to send George, the untrained monkey, to retrieve a satellite in the ocean, why is he even there in the first place? It doesn't even look like a satellite in any means. It literally just a metal box, and it actually kind of looks like a nuclear device you would find in the Soviet Union, which is also definitely not a coincidence. The Soviets are using George, training him to execute high-risk, highly specialized tasks like dismantling bombs and surviving space travel to flying a jet, and he does it perfectly. But that makes me need to ask one single question. Who is behind all of this? Or if not the lead secret Grand Master, who's the guy keeping George in check? The guy watching his every move, guiding his steps, building his trust, and manipulating him. No, it couldn't be. He's just a silly man with a hat. He's not a Russian spy, right? Okay, we're finally getting to the real meat of my theory. Now, at first, this may seem like a jump. We've established that George is being watched and manipulated on all sorts of stuff by the Soviet government, but to say the man in the yellow hat is some sort of spy, while sure it would be convenient, it has to have no evidence, right? So who exactly is the man in the yellow hat? It's a question that in a way sparked this video, other than the fact that why doesn't Curious George have a tail? Which you'll notice I've still not answered. The power of watch time. And the man in yellow is a very strange one. A man without a history, having no family, no friends, no job. He exists in the world of Curious George like a nameless being. He watches, he follows, but he doesn't do. Technically, we do have a name for him, being Ted Shackelford, but the name only exists in the Universal movie, which has actually been stated to be non-canon to both the books and the show by the creators themselves. Weird that they care that deeply about the lore of the Curious George franchise. Almost like there is lore. The lore being that the man in yellow hat is a Russian spy. This guy just seems to have no past, no name, no family, nothing. At this point, the best he has is the color yellow. The one single thing that stands out, because there literally is nothing else to him, is his unruling, passionate love for the color yellow. It's literally in his name. The man with the yellow hat also seems to have a very suspicious history with why he likes yellow and the same hat and suit so much. It's very weird. On an outside level, ignoring the canon or story, the man in yellow hat is in a yellow hat and suit because A, a consistent simple outfit is easier to draw en masse, but B, and more importantly, it gives him easy recognizability to a small child with his name and design. And I usually would let that pass because, well, even real people sometimes really like color and buy a bunch of the same outfit. I've done it. We all want to be a cartoon character, and well, the man in the yellow hat is. The difference in Curious George, though, is the man in the yellow hat has many different contradicting explanations on why he wears his hat and likes yellow and all sorts of things. Sometimes he's been wearing yellow suits and hats since he was a kid, but other times it's as his suits were covered in yellow paint and it just stuck. Yes, this is a real explanation. And other times it's along the simple lines of he just likes it. It's just weird that he has so many random contradicting explanations for what is his only character trait, unless it's all on purpose. A commonly used strategy used by, say, the Soviet government is to disguise a spy with a distinct element that can be spotted far, far away, but only matter to the people inside. What if his obsession with the color yellow is not him just liking it, it's him needing it. Some kind of cover for the fact he needs to wear the whole costume for him to actually get spotted by his scientist friends in the literal jungle or anywhere in the busy street of New York. A good proof he needs his hat and clothes is when he's in an episode where the man and George are going to get his driver license photo replaced with his yellow hat and suit, and George, being the evil chaotic monkey he is, knocks his hat in the sewer. The man in yellow begins breaking down, yelling, "What did you do? Without my hat, I'm nothing. I need it." This is a direct quote from the episode. Oh my god. The man in yellow also seems to have some sort of influence in, well, anything. Whether he's in New York City, San Francisco, the jungle, or any unnamed scientific organization, the man in yellow hat just seems to know everyone. From Jimmy's mom on the other side of New York, who he just happens to know and needs to go talk to, even though George in no way goes to school or participates in anything for the man to know any random moms. Or how about the many different scientists he knows even though he has no job? Something, again, we'll go over because it's very important. On top of all these people he just seems to know, everybody knows him and calls him not by his name, but by the man in the yellow hat. People in the city, New York, San Francisco, a random island, literally anywhere he ever comes across, they call him the man in the yellow hat. A weird thing that happens in one of the space episodes when the man in the yellow hat stumbles upon a scientist who unexpectedly visits him. They just have a full suit and helmet built for him that somehow fits the man in yellow's hat. Why do they have a helmet that fits a hat? Oh my god. It's all planned. Everything, every step. They're all in on it. Every scientist, every person, they're all listening to him. He's not just an agent, he is the mastermind. Everyone listens to him. His monkey can destroy a shop without consequence, flush metal down a toilet in their high-end apartment, let dangerous animals out of a zoo on civilians, or almost ruin a space mission, and somehow nothing happens to either of them. An easy example of the man in the yellow hat just having some heightened level power in the city and letting George get away with literally anything is in an episode where George and him go to a festival where there is food and people and a bunch of festival-like things because it's a festival. In this festival, there is a pancake stand with a very long line because it's taking a while, and oh my god, the monkey is trying to cook. So apparently the literal animal just goes in the kitchen and just starts making pancakes with not just his hands but his feet, something that in no way would ever or should ever be allowed. But somehow the man and George are not punished or told no at all, but in addition, the literal mayor of New York City is just there and gives the random monkey a gold award that he just had. This kind of also shows a gripe I think people in general have, removing the lore of the show, but also very importantly is why the man in the yellow hat is so wishy-washy on how he treats George. Sometimes he's a child who needs to constantly be watched. Other times he's a monkey who can cause chaos and roam the city. This directly ties with how the city treats him, except this is how the man in yellow himself showing his impersonal opinion on George. When he benefits from treating him like a child, he is one, but when he needs him to be a monkey to cause chaos or go to space because he thinks it's cool and has no concept of the danger of the vacuum of deep space, he will in a second. What loving father lets their untrained child, who is a literal monkey with no ability to verbalize anything to the point they go over it in multiple episodes, go to space on a dangerous mission where he could possibly be lost forever? That's a level of neglect I could only see come from a Russian spy. Now, the biggest evidence for this man being a Russian spy is his immense wealth without any job. He seems to just be very rich, but like we mentioned many times, he doesn't work. We see him occasionally leave the house sometimes, but not consistently enough for him to be working, plus no one ever mentions what he does. Interestingly enough, I did a study on when he goes out without explanation, and they seem to always be very close, or even the same episode as George's little adventures with scientists. Very interesting. This man doesn't just have access to, well, a lot of money, but generally things he inherently shouldn't have. Like the man has a doorman apartment in New York, 2 country houses all being fairly large, and unlimited access to planes, boats, a jetpack one time that specifically fit George the monkey, and again, has no job. The biggest sign of him having immense wealth, though, is the fact he can park his car in New York City. How? He's obviously a Russian spy. The only time he has a job is in a Universal movie where he works for a museum, but this isn't canon, and we know he doesn't work at the museum in the show because we've been to the museum many times and he just doesn't work there. This man is an enigma, to say at the least. No job, infinite money, everyone knows him, access to secret programs, planes, jetpacks, everything. He has to be working for them. He has to be a Russian spy. But after doing more research, I found out that he isn't just a random spy or being blackmailed or anything of the sort. No, he is definitively the mastermind, the head. It's all him, and I can prove it. In the very first Curious George book, the man in the yellow hat does actually have a job. It's the only time he has one, but he does. I actually said it at the very beginning of this video, but maybe you forgot. His job? An African poacher. This supposedly sweet, kind, innocent man just kidnaps George in the very first book. It's literally been in front of our eyes the entire time. But but then, immediately, he decides that George was different, and he just couldn't do it, and took him to a random home in the jungle, even though he was supposedly there on expedition, and taught him how to smoke pipe with him. He then took him home, and apparently never works again. It seems like he was seeing how he would respond to him teaching him a human act. It's all set up, and he's behind it. Okay. So we've established that the Soviets are using George, training, manipulating, and spying on him, with the man in yellow not only just being a spy, but the one at the top. But that only leads to more questions. Why does everyone in the city just bend not to the man in yellow's hat, but George's will, letting him cause chaos and destroying their city, a city that is empty, that is unnaturally void of life? There are no cars, no children we do not know, and everyone we do know, we know because of George. Everyone is there for George, watching him. Oh my God. One of the real main problems with my theory is the entire idea it's the Soviet government, even though we are canonically in New York City. So unless the Soviets have taken over the entire state of New York and multiple other cities and just a plethora of places in the US, then this theory falls apart, unless you think of it a little differently. What if instead of the Soviets taking over New York, the Soviets had their own New York? What if we weren't in the US at all? What if everything was fake, all for George? Don't believe me? Let me explain. The streets are empty, like really empty. I want you to remember that supposedly we're in New York City, where things like cars exist. Even removing that, there are usually people walking, crime, noise, but in this world, there are only a few cars next to very few places like where George lives and random other places. We never really see them being driven though, and we never find people walking unless we know them, and if we do know them, we usually will talk to them. More importantly, they'll talk to us. New York City just isn't like this. And in the show, they reference the city as noisy and always busy. We don't see that. So what exactly could this mean? What makes me think this isn't New York, at least the one we know? It just doesn't look like a bustling metropolis. It feels staged. An example of this is in San Francisco, when they travel there a few times in a few different episodes, and it raises a lot of questions. Looking at these episodes, there are again no cars in sight, not very many people except the ones they meet, but sometimes you can see people George knows, his friends, the shop owner down the street, just everyone watching him. Take in mind, this is in San Francisco, which is thousands of miles away from where George's friends should be. So why are they watching him? There just aren't any background characters in this show other than ones we know. The busy city of New York or San Francisco or anywhere on the planet doesn't have a soul but the people we know watching George. One of the biggest questions to Curious George that I feel as if we may fully answer now is why the people of his world would let him get away with literally anything. I said world because it's not just his friends or his street or his entire city, but literally everyone. Let's look at a few examples as you can find them in every single episode. Curious George flushes metal down the toilet of his high-end apartment complex. Curious George is then told by the entire complex, it's okay, just don't do it again. The most unrealistic part of this is landlords saying, it's okay. It's not okay. This is Russian propaganda. Okay, but that's just one time. Maybe the Russians or the Soviets, or whatever owns the apartment complex, pays for his dormant apartment and covers any issues like George destroying the pipes in an entire building. Except this isn't the first time stuff like this happens. Remember when I said Curious George at a random festival in New York broke many sanitary laws by making some pancakes? Not only did the line of customers we do in fact know cheer, but the mayor of New York gave him an award. That is weird. This single monkey somehow is given the respect and leniency, not just a celebrity, but at this point, royalty. Government officials are giving this random dude rewards for pancakes. Secret space stations are sending him to space. A weird man in a yellow suit is following him around. It has to be staged. This physically doesn't make sense unless this isn't really New York and these just aren't random people. Like, how exactly does he even get from New York to San Francisco on a plane? How is he getting into an airport? Even before 9/11, I doubt a random monkey is going on a cross-country plane ride. Does he have a passport? What is his legal age? 8, 9, 31. The logic of this world doesn't make sense unless it's constructed, but once you realize that, everything begins to fall in place. Now it makes way more sense why when George runs into random people in the middle of nowhere, they know exactly what he's doing, where he's going, and how to help. They know to talk to the man in the all yellow suit and the hat and the random monkey without a tail, and somehow know exactly what to say. Sounds like a script is being followed. Sounds like the man in yellow hat is sharing exactly where they're going, which we already know, and it sounds like it's all for George, the monkey. I did the math, and while the Soviets would have already spent billions of dollars on George and everything we know, so what's a few blocks of a fake New York, building a fake jungle for him to be found in, hiring actors to have lived there, all for George. And really looking at it, for a random person in the fake city, this sounds pretty good. They get in the crime-free, quiet, nice, friendly city with sure a monkey that causes chaos and destroys some property, but it's not really yours, so win-win. There's actually a little evidence even further that we are in Russia itself, found in the space episode, so you know they are just in a lore hiding mood. Basically, George is in space and trying to return home from the rocket, but he almost misses in the place he's supposed to land, and a scientist slips and says, if he goes to Silver North, he'll land at the North Pole. Not only is New York thousands of miles away from the North Pole, but it's the south of it, while Russia is the closest landmass to it and is directly north. Oh my god. All of this is all for George. Every trip to space, every actor hired, every scientist studying him is all for George. And it's working. He's listening, he's learning, and in the end, he thinks it's all a fun adventure. He thinks the man in the yellow hat is his friend, but he's not. He's not his friend. He's his keeper. He's the mastermind, the spy, the guide, the head. He doesn't care for George one bit. It's all a game, a mean to an end. Develop an advanced race of hyper-intelligent animals that listen at a call. They go on missions that no man would dare. We know they're doing this to others. We know George isn't the only one. We know this man doesn't even like yellow. And why does he do it all? Why does the man in yellow feel he needs to do this? Because he's a loser. George only likes him because he looks like a banana, and he knows it. That's why he breaks down when he loses his hat, because he has no name, no friends, no family. He knows it. He's just the man in the yellow hat, and without his hat, he's just a man. Okay, I usually end the theories on my over-dramatic ending, but we still need to answer why George doesn't have a tail, because I've kind of been holding that over your head. Sorry. Well, I think I actually have an idea. You think about it, George having a tail is actually a genius strategy by the Soviet government, because it gives him more mobility on the battlefield, making him more noticeable for all the people on the big plan. And if you really think about it, okay, I give up. That's a theory. Bye.